What I learned was to really lean into the collaboration with the visual effects team. Like, I think that this project really required an open mind because so much of it was constructed and so much of it wasn't there on the day. And so both the gaffer, myself, and the director are all sort of being really in touch with the visual effects supervisor on set and sort of helping guide that throughout post was a great experience, getting to kind of just play with them and create something really beautiful that didn't exist on the day. So my name is Peter Pascucci. I'm a cinematographer based in New York City. I primarily work on commercials and music videos, and then also do a bit of narrative work. I think in the commercial and music video space, like, what I really love about those projects is the chance to just like really play with like heightening reality and leaning more into like aesthetics and vibrancy and sort of like, I really love to play on those projects because I think they kind of lend themselves to that. And I think with narrative, it's kind of like pretty much the opposite. With narrative, it's like what I'm drawn to is grounded feeling cinematography. You know, I really love being able to explore like complex emotions and complex characters. And so the approach visually for those is quite a bit different than commercials and music videos. It feels like it's way more about just kind of stripping everything back and keeping it more simple and just letting the story kind of do its own thing. The first kind of like spark for visual storytelling was really doing photography at a really early age. So for me, it was a combination of being inspired by my older sister who did a lot of film photography when I was younger and seeing her like come home with these gorgeous black and white prints and just being so struck by the way that looked compared to like the digital photography of that time. Like, there was just something so stunning about it. My older brother was like more of like kind of a video game kind of coder type. So I think that the combination of just absorbing my older siblings' like interests, whether it be film photography or like more like software coding, editing software type of stuff, is what kind of like formed the initial interest in cinematography for me. It was kind of like a marriage of those two things. I had some professors at NYU that were just like total cinephiles and really showed us like films that I would have otherwise never seen. And, you know, I was really inspired by like Wings of Desire by Wim Wenders, any Tarkovsky film. That was a big inspiration at our schools. They have this experimental quality to them, both visually and narratively, that I'm super drawn to. So I think those were big inspirations kind of as I was forming my interests at school and everything. So this project that we're talking about today is a music video called Dance Alone. It's for the artist Sia, and then featured on the track is Kylie Minogue. It's very fun, it's very vibrant, very surreal, very experimental kind of. And I was so excited to be brought onto this project because the director reached out to me and like, you know, him and I were both like queer filmmakers, so the chance to work with like the iconic artists like Sia and Kylie Minogue was like just really exciting. And then when I received the treatment, I learned that he was just fully going for this like extremely surrealist and impressionistic kind of vibe. It just felt super exciting to me. I just love getting to play. I guess in terms of like the synopsis of the project and the meaning, it really riffs on the song. Like, the song's called Dance Alone, and it's really this like celebration of like kind of inner strength and like self-freedom and kind of like just that amazing feeling of just like having a blast with yourself. And like, so he kind of took that core theme of the lyrics in the song and really turned it into this like really interesting visual tapestry that essentially depicts like floating into someone's brain. And then once you're inside their brain, it's like the set sort of resembles the feeling of like the inner mind and like has all these warped walls and psychedelic lighting. And it's supposed to kind of be like a literal representation of going inside someone's mind while they're having like a dance party. It's always great when the projects have such strong references. And I think that was totally true on this one. Like, from the minute I opened the deck, there was already just so much going on there. I'm just always trying to get as close to the director's references as possible. And like, I think on this one, we managed to really do that, which was super exciting. Really from there was a process of working really closely with the production designer, working really closely with the gaffer, and trying to figure out how, you know, in this constructed environment of a studio with these set builds, how we could create this more like vast, surreal kind of landscape that were in the references. I think the core inspiration for the project was this like Danish interior designer named Werner Panton. This designer creates these like incredible rooms that kind of have like warped walls, and they're very layered, and they just kind of feel like the space is like sort of melting. It was a perfect thing to riff off of because it already had the feeling of like you're inside some piece of anatomy. Right away, it was like exciting because all these different layers of walls that he uses to create the depth of these spaces, like, for me, is so exciting because from lighting, like, you can add different layers of light to like create gradients of color and like depth and stuff. And so that construction that is shown in those Werner Pantone references very much directly translated to like the production designer's set build. We had a life-size set that represented those caverns, but then we also had a miniature set that had all these different pieces that could be shifted around and played with. Or another reference in the deck, which was less visual, but more kind of just like the feeling of it and the edit style and the sort of shooting style, was there was some Wong Kar-wai references in there, really specifically about just like step printing and cranking the shutter and having the dancers move like in a very blurred way past camera so that the editor could create some like dynamic sort of impressionistic editing points and stuff. I'm pretty loyal to shooting on ARRI cameras, so on this one we shot on the Alexa Mini LF. It felt like a great fit. I just love ARRI color science, and especially playing in a world where there's so many colors going on, like anything we can do to kind of protect ourselves from the colors feeling artificial was pretty important. So it from early on, it just made sense to shoot on ARRI. On a project where we're in a soundstage and where, you know, there's some practical set elements, but the majority of the visual is going to be created in visual effects, like any way that I can add a little bit of an impressionistic quality to the footage practically, like really helps, I think. I think having the edges be a little bit soft, having these practical set elements like sort of distort a little bit and maybe like swirl a little bit, just I think immediately puts it in a more realistic feeling environment. I think had I shot modern spherical lenses in that environment, then the whole thing I think would have felt a little less grounded and a little less realistic in a way. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to obscure the image a little bit and make it a little bit more painterly kind of, and shooting Anamorphic felt like it would achieve that. For me, when I test, I definitely try to test more in a qualitative way. So it really is just about like how a person's face is rendered, how the out of focus feels, you know, what the close focus feels like. After that point, it's just about bringing those lenses onto like as many projects as I can to see them in different environments. So, you know, leading up to this shoot, I was able to use the Mercuries like probably 6 or 7 times on various projects, whether they were commercials or passion projects and things like that. So it felt like I really had an understanding of how the 1.5 times felt and how like what the coverage felt like and what these 3 focal lengths that we were using felt like. Being in a stage and having a limited amount of depth to the space, and knowing that the goal was for these worlds to feel like very expansive and very large and larger than life and everything. An anamorphic lens that covers full frame is like so helpful in those situations, because we chose to shoot open gate, and then the 1.5 D squeeze gives us like this beautiful 2:1 aspect ratio that I'm such a fan of. And any opportunity to create like natural feeling flares in camera when it's a VFX job can be so helpful, because visual effects was able to kind of like use what we captured in camera with some of our sources flaring, and then add light sources and visual effects to sort of be the motivation for those flares and things like that, which was great. We shot on the 36 millimeter, the 42 millimeter, and the 72 millimeter. And we also had an Orion prototype lens, the 18 millimeter lens on this project. We essentially knew that we needed the 1.5 D squeeze for the sort of more like desert island set, but then when we were inside this cavern set, there was like a need for something even wider than like the 36 mil. So the Orion 18 mil ended up being like the perfect fit for that. We played mostly the 36 and the 42 for our wide sort of steady cam coverage, pushing in toward the island and sort of orbiting the dancers, and anything that felt really like dynamic and had a big group in it, or just wanted to feel wide, we were leaning into those. As soon as we started shooting the beauty close-ups of like Kylie Minogue and any sort of close-up sort of beauty performance coverage, we went right to the 72 millimeter. I mean, it gave us a real nice range going from really close to a little further away, and didn't have to use diopters or anything like that. So yeah, it felt like a really nice sort of mid to long range lens for the close-ups. This one was really, really fast. It was just a 1-day shoot, no pre-light, and we shot at Showbiz Studios in the Valley. And yeah, it's like a pretty large size stage, you know, it's just kind of, it's a nice space because it has a cyc wall, and just has really tall ceilings, and it's pretty big footprint. So the cyc really worked in our favor, because I sort of pitched in the prep phase that we avoid green screen and that we create color gradients on the cyc in order to make everything feel a little bit more grounded. So that was a cool experience, because I think there was a version of this video where everything around the practical sets was like chroma key, and instead the gaffer and I were able to create these kind of like salmon and orange gradients on the cyc and then just extend those colors out in the final video. So it was pretty, I mean, it was fairly small. It was a standard camera crew. So it was myself, first AC, second AC, Steadicam. There was a DIT as well. And then on the lighting side, it was like, I think gaffer +3 and key grip +3. So without a pre-light, it was a bit challenging to get all of our sets lit, you know, in a short window of time, just with a one-day shoot. But yeah, we were really happy with what we pulled off for sure. The camera budget and the lighting budget were pretty challenging on this one. We knew that we could lean on VFX to expand the world, but we still wanted to light it and make it look really beautiful on set. And I think we were totally able to do that. And their extensions and the things that they added and augmented were not too far off from how it looked through the monitor. And we essentially, on the day, had 2 sets and then a third one and a smaller one, fourth one, that were kind of like our main worlds. And so the sort of hero island set was a practical little sort of dirt island on a reflective floor. In the video, you'll see like dancers on, and you'll see Kylie Minogue performing on. And then there was another set that was like a pretty big like cavern set. And this set had the kind of warped Werner Panton walls and the like warped mirrors and the kind of like interesting psychedelic architecture. Yeah, the island set was a bit more standard in terms of lighting because it was just out in the open, and we could light from the grid, and we could light the cyc to create like a nice ambient backlight and a color wash and a color gradient. Whereas the cavern set was a bit more specific in terms of lighting approach. It was cool because we collaborated with the production designer to cover all the windows with like a light diffusion. And that allowed us to just shoot all of our units like through the windows. And so we had a ton of like cream source vortex units kind of all around this cavern set. And those units are fantastic because they're really powerful and they hold color really well. And they also can be programmed and do really cool like flashes and really cool chase effects and stuff. It was just about making it feel totally immersive. So it was like, how can we light through these windows and then find cool angles like up against the windows where maybe the key light, like if they get closer over here, they'll have like a blue key light and like a purple shadow, and then, you know, changing them all like, you know, just in a couple seconds to the whole space feeling like warm and like a weird like Blade Runner 2049 like kind of warm world. And yeah, it was cool to just play in that cavern set and have anywhere you looked, like there was no lights that you had to avoid, and it allowed us to just cover it very dynamically and get a bunch of different coverage in there. If I could go back, what I would have done was been a little bit more careful about marking our ins and out points for Steadicam for focus, actually, because when you're working with like celebrity talent and the schedule's really tight and you have, you know, you're spending most of the morning lighting, when it comes time to shoot, it's like every little moment that's recorded in the camera should be usable for the editor. And because we didn't like take the time to really be like, okay, here's our A mark, here's our B mark, and like here's our mid mark, and like map all that out, because things were moving so quickly, like focus definitely did like buzz at times. And like fortunately, like the video does lend itself to this kind of more like in and out world. It's not like everything doesn't need to be perfectly precise. Like there is some beauty in like some imperfect moments, but there was some experience on the post side where it was like, as we went through the footage, it was like this desire to have absolutely everything nailed with focus. And yeah, that's what I would have been a little bit more, would have talked to the AD more and been like, yeah, let's mark this out and really be specific about how we approach that. I'm so grateful for my gaffer, Ryan Silber, who worked on this with me. And, you know, from the very beginning, when we were told kind of what the resources were, it felt extremely challenging to achieve kind of these super colorful, vibrant, expansive and immersive worlds. And with his help, yeah, we just were able to really like create some gorgeous looks. And I think that it was very exciting for me to see the different phases of the image, to see like in prep what we were kind of looking at in terms of just the raw set with no light and just some dancers rehearsing in the set, and then on set to see what that then looked like with the dancers in there and with all of our lighting. And then I was pretty involved in the post pipeline, which was a really nice thing about this project too, where I was able to really see how the visual effects were coming together and weigh in and say kind of how maybe things should be tweaked or changed. Or at that phase, it was the most exciting because the lighting and the visual effects and everything started to really come together and never deviated from the original treatment. Like it always felt very true to that. And yeah, to have that cleanliness throughout the whole pipeline and to feel like even at the very end of it, we were hitting. So some of the creative references in the deck was exciting. So yeah, the first still that I wanted to talk about a little bit was this very wide perspective inside the cavern set, lit kind of in a very warm tone. I chose this one because it is actually a great example of this Orion 18mm lens, and I was showing the director each of the focal lengths we had to try to land on like what felt right for the cavern. And we tried the 36, we tried the 42. We knew that we would use the 72 for like beauty close-ups inside the cavern, but it wasn't until I put on the Orion 18 that like we just were like so thrilled about it. And he had this like awesome reaction on set that was like, that's it, you know, like that's exactly what this should be. And yeah, it's just so brilliant, like to have an 18 that's a 2x D squeeze. And we left the camera in open gate. So we shot 3x2 Alexa Mini LF open gate, and this 18mm covered the vertical sensor. In the case of this video, we were cropping to 16:9, so it of course didn't cover horizontally, but because we were cropping to 16:9, what was left was a pretty subtle vignette. It actually surprised me that the director totally embraced the vignette, but he was like all about it. So the vignette stayed in the video. I think some other things about this still is like most of what is seen is practical. Like the set was looked just like this, the lighting looked just like this. And what VFX did in the case of this set was they added more warping and more watery feeling, like texture that kind of makes everything feel like it's alive. So when it's playing in motion, like the windows all might be kind of warping a bit and changing shape and stuff. Yeah, so another still that I selected was this image of a dancer inside the cavern. This one was a lot of fun because this was the moment in the day where we took the camera off Steadicam and put the 18mm Orion on, and I was able to kind of wander through this cavern set and just find interesting compositions that weren't necessarily shot listed, but were just moments that we wanted to kind of discover. This is where a lot of that like Wong Kar-wai stuff kind of came into play, because we had all these windows that could be changed to different colored light. So it was like a window could be teal and the ambient inside the space could be purple, or we could make it all warm. And so I love this moment because it was certainly a very surreal lighting look. It was like a teal window hit with a purple violet ambient, and then I just had the 18mm and I kind of put it really up high and was looking down at talent, like looking into the window, and it just felt like this very interesting perspective that kind of everything feels stretched and distorted in a pretty cool way. All of the dancers were incredible. They were like so talented, and it's always exciting too when the dancers kind of like understand the cinematography of it all, because they were totally synced up with us on like what types of poses worked for the frames that we were composing and stuff, and it just felt like we were working with pros for sure. This was one of my favorite references and one of my favorite things to try to achieve through lighting, because the director had a reference in the deck that was clearly like some sort of CGI thing that involved these like orbs of light floating around someone standing kind of like in the desert. These types of things are really fun challenges, because what you have in this reference is like all these light sources that don't exist in the real world, like these floating orbs. And so the gaffer and I worked really closely with visual effects to figure out how to emulate orbs floating through the air from a lighting motivation standpoint. And so what we ended up doing was like setting up a bunch of small old school ARRI Fresnel lights. I think they were like 350 watt or maybe 150 watt Fresnels, and we just created like a big circle around talent with those. And then on the dimmer board, the gaffer was able to sort of time those to kind of dim up and dim down on different parts of her figure. The other lighting in the image, all the purple violet light and the tungsten ambient on top was all practical, was happening there on set. And then yeah, visual effects just replaced all those little Fresnel units with these orbs and dimmed the orbs up and down through visual effects as our lights dimmed up and down. And yeah, it just ended up to me feeling pretty believable, and never strayed too far away from what this might look if it were to happen in real life. So yeah, this still of Kylie Minogue is one that I chose because it's a good example of how beautiful the 72mm Mercury can be. And this is kind of what I was talking about earlier, where it's like, you know, in these environments where you have foreground elements and background elements, a lot of it otherwise is visual effects. Like anything you can do with lensing to kind of make those elements feel more organic and more real really helps. So it was super fun on the 72 to just feel the foreground warping in the background, and she was just really nicely in focus. And yeah, this was another moment where we had a practical light source that was supposed to flare the lens and feel like a sun source. Everyone was just so happy with the warm anamorphic flare that was happening on set, and kind of obscuring her face, and then we would go behind something else and it would disappear, and it just felt very organic and really natural. in this sort of studio environment. So the timing is cool because I'm in LA shooting another music video for the same director, and yeah, we're shooting a Reba McEntire video. It's a lot of the same team, and the creative is similarly really beautiful. This one is leaning more kind of editorial fashion, desert world, a little less psychedelic. It's gonna be sort of a similar approach where there's practical set elements, and then kind of subtle, elegant visual effects that kind of expand the world out and make it feel more immersive and everything. So really excited for that one. Huge thanks to Alice for supporting this project. I feel like but budget was really challenging on this one, and to be able to work on the Mercury lenses and the Orion was like honestly the reason that the project was successful. So yeah, super grateful to y'all for helping out and for this interview.